I always thought hitting rock bottom would come with some kind of noise, a loud crash, maybe the sound of glass breaking, or even a scream tearing through the air like in those dramatic movies I used to watch with Simone late at night. But that morning, when I collapsed right there on the kitchen floor, it was eerily quiet. The only thing I could hear was the faint hum of the fridge and my own ragged breathing. The smell of burnt toast hung heavy around me. I'd been trying to make breakfast for the kids before school, juggling that with answering work emails on my phone and double-checking Aurora's science project on the counter. My hands had started shaking about an hour before, but I ignored it, chalking it up to too much coffee or not enough sleep. Then my vision went tight, like the world was squeezing in around me, and the next thing I knew, I was down, the cold tile pressing into my cheek, my body refusing to move. I don't know how long I lay there, could have been seconds, could have been minutes, but when I opened my eyes, Simone was standing over me. Her face was calm, too calm, like she'd been expecting this. "You need help, Callan," she said, her voice soft but firm, the way she talked to Miles when he scraped his knee. I wanted to argue, to tell her I was just tired, that I'd been up since 4:30 a.m. doing everything for everyone. But my tongue felt thick, and my head was spinning. She helped me up, her hands steady on my arms, and I leaned on her because I didn't have a choice. The kids were already at school, thank God. I didn't want them seeing me like this, weak and useless on the floor. Simone said she'd take care of it, that she'd drive me somewhere to rest. I thought she meant a doctor's office or maybe even just home to bed, so I nodded, still dazed, trusting her because she was my wife, the woman I'd built a life with over 17 years. She drove me to this place called Silver Grove Wellness Center, a low building with clean white walls and a sign that promised peace and renewal. It sounded nice, like a spa or something, and I figured I'd be in and out after a quick checkup. She walked me inside, her arm looped through mine like we were on some kind of date, and the receptionist smiled at us with this practiced warmth that made my stomach twist. They took my keys, my wallet, my phone, just for now, they said, and Simone kissed my forehead, her lips dry and quick, before she turned and left. I watched her go, her heels clicking on the polished floor, and I thought she'd be back soon. I thought this was temporary, a pit stop to get me back on my feet. But as the door closed behind her, something in me shifted, a quiet alarm I couldn't name yet. They led me to a room with a single bed and a window that didn't open, and I sat there, waiting for someone to explain what was happening. A nurse came in with a clipboard and a cup of water, handed me 2 small pills, and said, "These will help you relax, Mr. Mercer." I swallowed them because I didn't know what else to do, and the fog in my head got thicker. Hours passed, maybe days. I couldn't tell without my phone or a clock. When I asked about going home, the nurse just smiled and said, "We'll see how you're doing tomorrow." That's when I started to wonder if this wasn't about rest at all. I tried to picture Simone's face again, that look she'd given me on the kitchen floor, and for the first time, I wasn't sure it was love I'd seen in her eyes. It felt more like relief, like she'd been waiting for me to break so she could finally put me somewhere out of the way. My chest tightened at the thought, but I pushed it down, telling myself I was overreacting, that she'd come back for me soon. She had to. I was her husband, the father of her children. But as the lights dimmed for the night and the silence of that sterile room swallowed me whole, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been dropped into something I didn't understand, a place where I wasn't meant to recover, but to be erased. The first day at Silver Grove Wellness Center felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from, but by the second day, I knew it was real, and it was worse than I'd imagined. They'd taken my phone right when I walked in, saying it was for my safety, and I didn't fight it because I was still groggy from the collapse, still trusting Simone to sort this out. But when I asked for it back that morning, the nurse, a woman with a tight bun and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, just shook her head and said, "Not yet, Mr. Mercer. We need to focus on your recovery." Recovery from what? I wanted to yell. I'd passed out once, sure, but I wasn't some broken man who needed to be locked away. I'd been running on fumes, work, kids, keeping the house together while Simone flitted between her meetings and her self-care weekends, but I wasn't sick. At least, I didn't think I was. They gave me more pills, little white ones they said were for balance, and I took them because I didn't know what else to do. My head felt like it was stuffed with cotton, and every time I tried to piece together what was happening, my thoughts slipped away like water through my fingers. I asked to call Aurora and Miles. My daughter's sharp wit and my son's quiet laugh were the only things I wanted to hold on to, but the nurse's face hardened. "You're not in the right condition to communicate with your children," she said, like I was some kind of danger to them. That hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd spent 16 years raising Aurora, 13 with Miles, coaching their teams, fixing their bikes, staying up late to help with homework. I wasn't perfect, but I was their dad. How could I not be in the right condition to talk to them? I pressed her, my voice shaking, asking when I could call, when I could go home, but she just repeated the same line. We'll see how you're doing tomorrow. It was a script, and I was starting to hear the cracks in it. That afternoon, Simone came by. I saw her through the glass door of the visitor room, her dark hair pulled back, her coat draped over her arm like she was on her way to something important. My heart lifted for a second. She'd come to get me, to take me back to our messy, loud, beautiful life. I stood up as she walked in, ready to hug her, to tell her I was fine, but she didn't meet my eyes. She sat across from me, her hands folded tight in her lap, and said, "Callan, this is for the best. You've been under so much stress. The kids and I need you to get better." Her voice was smooth, rehearsed, and it didn't sound like the woman I'd married, the one who'd laughed with me over burnt dinners or cried in my arms when her mom passed. This was someone else, someone who'd already decided I didn't fit in her picture anymore. I tried to argue, to tell her I just needed a break, not this place, but she cut me off. "The doctors know what's best," she said, standing up. Then she leaned down, kissed my forehead quick, cold, like she was checking something off a list, and walked out. I watched her go, her heels clicking down the hall, and I called after her, "Simone, wait." But the door shut, and she didn't turn back. I sat there, staring at the empty chair, my chest tight with something I couldn't name yet, anger, maybe, or fear. That night, I asked the nurse about Simone again, just wanting to know when she'd visit next, when I could talk to her about the kids. The nurse didn't even look up from her clipboard. She asked not to be contacted, she said, like it was nothing, like my wife hadn't just cut me out of her life with a single sentence. That's when it hit me, hard and clear through the fog of those damn pills. This wasn't about helping me. This wasn't temporary. Simone hadn't brought me here to rest. She'd brought me here to disappear. The realization sank into my bones, heavy and cold, and I lay in that narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how the woman I'd loved for half my life could do this. I thought about Aurora's sarcastic grin, Miles's quiet, "Love you, Dad," before bed, and my hands clenched into fists. They were out there, and I was in here, locked away like some problem she needed to solve. The pills they gave me the next morning sat in my palm, and I stared at them, my mind racing. I didn't swallow them this time. I tucked them under my tongue, then spit them into a tissue when the nurse turned away. I needed to think, to fight, but the days kept blurring together. The staff watched me like I was a lab rat, jotting notes whenever I asked questions. I stopped asking about going home. They'd just lie anyway. I started watching instead, listening to the routines, the shift changes, the way the locks clicked on the doors. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I had to get out. Simone thought she could erase me, bury me in this place, and move on with whatever life she was building without me. But I wasn't gone yet. I was still Callan Mercer, still a father, still a man with something left to say. And I'd be damned if I let her turn me into nothing. 5 days into this nightmare at Silver Grove, I was starting to feel like the walls were closing in, like every breath I took was just me sinking deeper into the trap Simone had set. The pills they kept shoving at me made my head fuzzy, and I'd been pretending to take them for 2 days now, spitting them into tissues, flushing them when I could, anything to keep my mind sharp. I didn't trust anyone here, not the nurses with their fake smiles or the doctors who talked to me like I was a child. I spent my time pacing the small room they'd stuck me in, staring out the locked window at a world I couldn't reach, thinking about Aurora and Miles, wondering what Simone had told them about me. Was I sick in their eyes now? Did they think I'd abandoned them? The thought twisted my gut, kept me awake at night, but it also lit something inside me, a spark I hadn't felt since I'd hit that kitchen floor. I wasn't going to let her win this. I wasn't going to fade away. That's when I met Davina. She was a night nurse, different from the others. Her eyes were sharp, like she saw through the bullshit, and she moved with this quiet energy that made me notice her right away. It was late, maybe 2 a.m., and she came in with the med cart, her dark hair tied back, her uniform crisp but not stiff. She didn't say much at first, just handed me the little cup with the pills and watched me with those eyes. I faked swallowing them, tucking them under my tongue like I'd been doing, and she didn't call me out. Instead, she leaned in close, so close I could smell the faint mint on her breath, and whispered, "You're not broken, Callan, but they want you to believe you are." Her words hit me like a jolt, cutting through the haze I'd been fighting. I stared at her, my heart pounding, and before I could ask what she meant, she slipped something into my hand. A small, cold object, no bigger than a thumbnail. "Proof," she said, her voice barely audible. Then she straightened up and pushed the card out like nothing had happened. I closed my fist around it, my pulse racing, and waited until the lights dimmed and the hallway went quiet. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I opened my hand and saw it. A flash drive, black and plain, the kind I used to use for work files. My hands shook as I turned it over, wondering what the hell she'd given me and why. I didn't have a computer in here, no way to see what was on it, but I knew it was important. I grabbed my pillow, ripped a small tear in the lining with my fingernail, and stuffed the drive inside, pushing it deep into the stuffing where no one would find it. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with questions. Who was Davina? Why was she helping me? And what kind of proof could fit on something so small that it'd matter in a place like this? I thought about Simone, about that cold kiss on my forehead, the way she'd walked out without looking back. Davina's words kept echoing. They want you to believe you are. They. Not just the staff, but her too. My wife. The woman I'd built a life with, the mother of my kids. It was starting to click, piece by ugly piece. She didn't just want me out of the house. She wanted me gone, erased, like I'd never existed. The anger burned hot in my chest, but it wasn't wild. It was focused, like a blade sharpening itself. I got up and paced again, quieter this time, my bare feet cold on the floor. I started thinking about what I'd do with that flash drive, how I'd get it out of here, how I'd use it to fight back. I didn't know what was on it yet. Maybe evidence of why I was here, maybe something about Simone, but it was a lifeline, a crack in the wall they'd built around me. I stopped faking the pills completely after that. Every time they brought them, I'd palm them, crush them into dust under my shoe when no one was looking, anything to keep my head clear. The fog lifted slowly, and with it came a clarity I hadn't had in days. I started watching Davina too, catching her glances during her rounds, trying to figure out her game. She didn't say much after that first night, but she'd linger sometimes, adjusting my chart or refilling my water, and I'd feel her eyes on me, like she was waiting for me to make a move. I wanted to ask her a million things, how she knew me, what she'd seen, how I could get out, but the cameras in the corners and the orderlies lurking in the halls kept my mouth shut. Still, that spark she'd lit grew into something bigger, something I could hold on to. I wasn't broken. I wasn't crazy. I was a man who'd been betrayed, locked away by the one person I'd trusted most, and now I had a chance to claw my way back. Lying there in the dark, the pillow with its hidden secret under my head, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to rot in this place, blending into the beige walls and the hum of the fluorescent lights. I was going to get out, find out what Simone had done, and make her pay for every lie she'd told. I'd burn it all down if I had to. Her plans, her control, her perfect little world without me in it. And when I did, she'd see I wasn't the weak, trembling mess she'd left on the kitchen floor. I was something else now, something she'd never see coming. By the time I'd been at Silver Grove for a week, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I had to get out, or I'd lose myself in this place for good. The flash drive Davina gave me was still hidden in my pillow, a tiny weight that felt heavier every day, like it was pulling me towards something I couldn't see yet. I didn't know what was on it, but it was my only shot, and I wasn't going to let it sit there while Simone rewrote my life without me. Davina and I didn't talk much after that first night. She couldn't risk it with the cameras and the other staff always around. But we'd worked out a plan in bits and pieces, stolen moments when she'd adjust my four or hand me a cup of water. Her eyes would flick to mine, quick and sharp, and she'd mutter things like Tuesday, lunch, or fire exit, left hall. I pieced it together, my heart pounding every time she walked away, knowing we were playing with fire. Tuesday came, and I was ready, or as ready as I could be with no shoes, no phone, and a body still shaky from days of dodging their drugs. Lunch was the perfect time. The dining hall was loud, chaotic, with patients shuffling around and orderlies distracted by trays and spills. I sat at my usual table, picking at the gray mush they called food, my hands sweating as I waited for the right moment. Davina had told me to make a scene, something big enough to pull attention but not so wild they'd lock me down tight. So I did. I stood up, slow at first, then flipped my tray hard onto the floor, mashed potatoes and plastic clattering everywhere. The voices. I shouted, grabbing my head like I'd seen in movies, staggering back against the wall. They're in the vents. They're screaming at me. Heads turned, patients froze, and the orderlies rushed over, their radios crackling. I kept it up, yelling nonsense about shadows and whispers, letting my legs buckle so they'd think I was cracking. One of them grabbed my arm, another called for a sedative, and I didn't fight. I let them drag me toward the med room, my heart hammering so loud I thought they'd hear it. They stuck a needle in my arm, but I'd swapped the vial earlier. Davina had slipped me a dummy dose during her last round. Just saline. Nothing to knock me out. I went limp anyway, playing the part. My eyes half closed as they hauled me back to my room and dumped me on the bed. I waited there, counting the seconds, listening to their footsteps fade down the hall. Then it came, the fire alarm, shrill and piercing, right on schedule. Davina had rigged it, a short in the nurse's station sheet set up with a frayed cord and a spilled coffee cup. Chaos erupted outside my door, shouts, running feet, the smell of smoke that wasn't real but felt like it. I rolled off the bed, grabbed the orderly scrubs I'd stashed under the mattress, ones I'd swiped from a laundry cart 2 nights before, and pulled them on fast, my hand shaking as I tied the drawstring. The flash drive went into my pocket, a hard little promise against my thigh. I cracked the door, peeked out, and saw the hallway filling with patients and staff, everyone moving toward the main exit. I went the other way, left like Davina said, my bare feet silent on the tile. The fire exit was there, just past the supply closet, a heavy door with a blinking green light. I pushed it open, half expecting an alarm to scream, but nothing came. Davina must have disabled it. Cold night air hit me like a slap, and I stumbled out into the dark, my breath fogging in front of me. I didn't stop to think. I ran, ducking behind a dumpster where Davina had said she'd leave the key. My fingers fumbled under the trash can, scraping dirt and rust, until I felt it, a single car key, taped to the bottom. I yanked it free and sprinted to the lot, spotting the beat-up sedan she'd promised, parked near the edge with no plates. I slid in, jammed the key into the ignition, and the engine sputtered to life. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles went white, and I peeled out, tires crunching gravel as I hit the road. I didn't know where I was going, just away from Silver Grove, away from the cage Simone had locked me in. The headlights cut through the night, trees blurring past, and I kept checking the rearview, expecting lights or sirens, but nothing came. I drove for hours, my mind racing faster than the car. I thought about Aurora and Miles, about what they'd think if they knew I'd just broken out of that place. I thought about Simone, probably asleep in our bed, thinking she'd won. My chest burned with anger, but it kept me sharp, kept me moving. I ended up at a trailer Davina had told me about, some friend's place on the edge of nowhere, a rusted box hidden in the woods off a dirt road. I pulled up, cut the engine, and sat there, the silence roaring in my ears. The key was still in my hand, the flash drive in my pocket, and I was alive, free, shaking with adrenaline. I wasn't Callan Mercer anymore, not the husband who'd collapsed, not the father who'd been erased. That man was gone, left behind in that sterile room. I stepped out into the damp air, the trailer looming dark and quiet, and I knew this was where I'd start over. I'd build something new, something Simone couldn't touch. She thought she'd buried me, but I was just getting started. The trailer smelled like damp wood and old coffee when I stepped inside, but it was mine, at least for now, and that was enough. I'd been on the run for less than a day, still wired from the escape, my hands trembling as I locked the door behind me and sank onto a sagging couch in the dark. The flash drive was still in my pocket, pressing against my leg, but I didn't have a computer yet to see what Davina had risked so much to give me. I didn't need it to know one thing. I couldn't go back to being Callan Mercer, not yet. Simone had taken that name, twisted it into something weak and broken, and I wasn't going to let her keep it. I needed a new start, a new skin to wear while I figured out how to fight back. That's when I came up with Roninvale. It hit me as I sat there, staring at the cracked ceiling, the name rolling around in my head like it had been waiting for me. Ronin, quiet, strong, a little rough around the edges. Vale, like a valley, a place to rebuild. It felt right, like a shield I could hide behind while I clawed my way up. Before Simone had convinced me to give up my dreams, I'd been good at design, branding, logos, websites, the kind of stuff that made startups look sharp and big companies feel fresh. I'd shelved it all to support her career, to keep the house running, to be the dad who was always there. Now, those skills were all I had left, and I was going to use them. I found an old laptop in the trailer's bedroom, a clunky thing with a flickering screen, but it worked. I spent that first night setting up a freelance profile at Ronan Vale, digital branding expert, no photo, no past, just a portfolio I mocked up from memory and a burner email. I didn't sleep, didn't eat, just worked, my fingers flying over the keys, building something out of nothing. By morning, I'd sent pitches to a dozen small businesses I found online, offering cheap rates to get my foot in the door. The first job came in that afternoon, a logo for a coffee shop in some town I'd never heard of. $50, but it was a start. I worked fast, clean, pouring everything I had into it, and the client loved it. Word spread, and soon I had more flyers, websites, even a full rebrand for a local gym. I called it Valehouse Creative, a name that sounded bigger than me, bigger than this rusted trailer. Clients liked the mystery, the faceless designer who delivered on time and didn't ask questions. I kept my head down, used cash from a stash Davina's friend had left in the trailer, bought a cheap prepaid phone and a second-hand jacket from a thrift store 30 miles away. I wasn't Callan anymore, not to the world, and it felt good, like I was taking back a piece of myself Simone didn't know she'd lost. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. A new contract landed in my inbox, forwarded through a shell LLC I'd set up to keep things untraceable. It was a big one, $5,000 for a complete rebrand, logo, website, the works. I opened the brief, and my stomach dropped. The client was Simone's company, Mercer Solutions, her consulting firm she'd built while I played house husband. She'd hired me, Ronan Vale, to redesign her empire, the one she'd funded by draining our joint accounts the day she locked me away. I sat there, staring at the screen, my hands clenched into fists, a laugh bubbling up in my throat that sounded more like a growl. She didn't know it was me, couldn't know. The LLC buried my tracks, and Ronan Vale was a ghost. But I knew, and the irony was so thick I could taste it. She was paying me to rebuild the thing she'd stolen from me, the life she'd ripped apart. I took the job. How could I not? I poured myself into it, every line, every color choice a quiet jab at her. The logo was sleek, sharp, with a hidden edge, a subtle V woven into the design that stood for Vale, for victory. I finished it in a week, sent it off, and watched the payment hit my account. $5,000 of her money, now mine, sitting in a bank she couldn't touch. I leaned back in the creaky chair, the trailer's silence wrapping around me, and let myself smile for the first time since that kitchen floor. It wasn't just the money. It was the power, the secret I held over her. She thought I was gone, erased, but here I was, pulling strings she didn't even see. I used the cash to buy a better laptop, a printer, some clothes that didn't smell like mothballs. Valehouse grew. More clients, bigger projects, a reputation that spread online without ever showing my face. I kept the trailer as my base, a hideout where no one could find me. But I started dreaming bigger. I'd get to Aurora and Miles somehow. Let them know I wasn't the mess Simone had painted me as. I'd use this new life to dig into what she'd done, why she'd done it, and how deep her lies went. The flash drive sat on the table now, plugged into the laptop, but I hadn't opened it yet. Part of me was afraid of what I'd find. Part of me wanted to build Ronan Vale stronger first. Simone thought she'd won, thought she'd buried me in that wellness center and walked away clean. But I was rising, piece by piece, and she'd handed me the tools to do it. I'd make her regret that. I'd make her regret everything. Living as Ronan Vale in that trailer felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for the world to catch up to me. But I couldn't stop moving forward, not when Aurora and Miles were out there, believing whatever lies Simone had fed them. I'd been gone from their lives for weeks now, maybe months. I'd lost track of time between Silver Grove and this new existence, and the thought of them thinking I'd abandoned them ate at me every night. I couldn't call them, couldn't text. Simone had my old phone, my old life, locked up tight. She'd told the staff at Silver Grove I was too unstable to talk to them, and I had no doubt she'd spun the same story at home. "Your dad's sick," she'd probably said, her voice all soft and sad, playing the worried wife while she erased me from their world. My hands clenched just thinking about it, the way she'd turned my own kids against me without me even getting a chance to fight back. But I wasn't helpless anymore. I had Valehouse Creative, a growing stack of cash, and that flash drive still waiting to spill its secrets. I just needed a way to reach them, to plant a seed of doubt about her story. I started with what I could see from the outside, their online lives. Aurora was 16, smart as hell, always posting on her blog about school, books, whatever random thoughts popped into her head. I'd found it using the trailer's shaky Wi-Fi, typing her name into a search bar with my heart in my throat. Her latest posts were different, though, short, heavy, full of lines like, "Some people leave without saying goodbye, and trust is a ghost now." No names, but I knew it was about me. It hurt to read, like a knife twisting in my chest, but it also gave me hope. She was questioning things, even if she didn't know it yet. Miles was quieter, 13, still figuring out who he was, not big on social media. His last post was a photo of his skateboard, captioned "grinding solo." That was it, but it told me enough. He was pulling back, closing off, the way he did when he was upset. I sat there, staring at the laptop screen, my kids' lives reduced to pixels and words, and I knew I had to do something. Direct contact was too risky. Simone would trace it, drag me back into her web, but I could send them something anonymous, something to make them think. Aurora had interned at a legal nonprofit last summer, shadowing paralegals, learning about contracts and fraud. She'd loved it, came home every day with stories about cases she'd read. If anyone could spot a lie in a stack of papers, it was her. So I started digging. I didn't have access to my old accounts or files, but I had my memory, and I'd always been the one to handle our family's paperwork, taxes, bank statements, bills. I remembered the day I'd collapsed, how Simone had been on her phone right after, typing fast, her face blank. I hadn't thought much of it then, but now it stuck out. What if she'd been moving money, setting things up while I was down? I couldn't prove it yet, but I could guess. Using the prepaid phone, I called a guy I'd worked with years ago, a freelance accountant named Pete, who owed me a favor. I told him I was Ronan Vale, digging into a client's finances, and gave him just enough details. Our bank, Simone's name, to get him started. He came back 2 days later with a gold mine, a forged power of attorney document, filed the day I was admitted to Silver Grove, giving Simone full control of our accounts. She'd drained them fast. Hundreds of thousands moved to her company, Mercer Solutions, under the guise of business expenses. Pete emailed me PDFs, blurry scans of signatures that weren't mine, dates that lined up too perfectly. It was a gut punch, seeing how quick she turned on me, but it was also ammunition. I printed the files on the trailer's cheap printer, added bank records Pete had pulled, and threw in a handwritten note. If Dad was so sick, why did Mom empty his accounts the day he left? No signature, no return address, just a question to rattle them. I mailed the first package to Aurora from a post office an hour away, using a fake name on the label. Miles got one too, same stuff, sent the next day. I didn't know if they'd open them, didn't know if Simone would intercept them, but I had to try. Days passed, and I watched their online traces like a hawk. Aurora's blog went silent for a week, then she posted a single line, "Paper trails don't lie." My heart jumped. She'd seen it, understood it. Miles was slower, but his next post was a photo of our old backyard swing set, captioned, "Miss this." No mention of me, but it was a crack, a sign he was thinking about the past, about what we'd lost. I kept sending packages, more documents, a timeline I pieced together, anything to chip away at Simone's story. I stayed invisible, Ronan Vale working in the shadows, but I could feel the shift. Aurora started asking questions online, vague but pointed. Who do you trust when the story changes? Miles posted less, but when he did, it was old photos, me teaching him to skate, us at a baseball game. They were waking up, piece by piece, and I was the ghost guiding them. Simone didn't know it yet, but her lies were fraying, and I was the one pulling the ass-catching the threads. Every package, every whisper, was a step closer to them, and I wasn't stopping until they saw the truth. The gala was Simone's big night, and I knew it was my chance to turn everything upside down. I'd been building Ronan Vale for weeks, hiding in that trailer, watching Vale House Creative grow while I sent those packages to Aurora and Miles, chipping away at the wall of lies she'd built around them. Then the email came, a request from Mercer Solutions, Simone's company, asking Ronan Vale to be the guest speaker at their fundraiser gala for the new Mercer Foundation. They wanted me to unveil the rebrand I'd done for them, the one she'd paid me $5,000 for without knowing who I really was. The invitation sat on my laptop screen, glowing in the dim trailer, and I just stared at it, my pulse racing. This was it, the moment to step out of the shadows and hit her where it hurt, right in front of everyone she'd fooled. I said yes, of course. How could I not? I spent days planning, writing a speech that wasn't just about logos and branding, but about truth, about what she'd done to me. I didn't sleep much. Every night was me pacing the trailer, rehearsing lines, imagining her face when she realized who I was. I bought a suit from a second-hand shop, dark gray and simple, nothing flashy, but it fit Ronan Vale, understated, sharp, a man with something to say. The gala was at a downtown hotel, all glass and chandeliers, the kind of place Simone loved to show off in. I drove there in the beat-up sedan Davina had left me, my hands sweaty on the wheel, the flash drive in my pocket like a loaded gun. I'd finally looked at it a week ago. Files from Silvergrove, records of my admission, emails between Simone and the director about keeping him compliant. It was all there, proof she'd planned it, and I'd brought copies, ready to use them. I walked in as Ronan Vale, my head high, shaking hands with people who had no idea they were greeting a ghost. The room was packed for 100 guests, suits and dresses, champagne flutes clinking, all there to celebrate Simone's new venture, funded with the money she'd stolen from me. I saw her across the room, laughing with some executive, her hair swept up, her dress a deep red that screamed power. My stomach twisted, but I kept my face blank, nodding at the event coordinator who ushered me backstage. Aurora and Miles were there too. I spotted them near the front, Aurora in a black blazer, Miles fidgeting with his tie. They didn't know I was coming, didn't know Ronan Vale was their dad, but they'd feel it soon enough. The lights dimmed, and Simone took the stage first, all smiles and grace, thanking everyone for supporting the Mercer Foundation, talking about new beginnings and community impact. I stood in the wings, my heart pounding, watching her play the saint while I gripped the folder of evidence in my hand. Then she introduced me, Ronan Vale, the visionary behind our rebrand, and the crowd clapped as I stepped into the spotlight. I felt the weight of every eye on me, but I didn't flinch. I started easy, talking about the design, unveiling the logo on the big screen behind me, sleek, modern, with that hidden V I'd slipped in for myself. The room murmured approval, and Simone nodded from her seat, smug, thinking she'd hired a stranger to polish her image. I let the applause die down, then I shifted gears. This project was personal for me, I said, my voice steady, loud enough to fill the space. Because it's about more than a logo. It's about truth. I pulled out the first document, a scan of the forged power of attorney, and held it up. This was filed the day Callan Mercer was admitted to Silvergrove Wellness Center, giving his wife full control of his accounts. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Simone's smile froze. I kept going, laying it out step by step, the money drained, the emails proving she'd orchestrated my confinement, the lies she'd told our kids. I didn't look at her yet. I focused on the room, on Aurora and Miles, whose head snapped up when I said my real name. I'm not just Ronan Vale, I said, finally meeting Simone's eyes. I'm Callan Mercer. And this woman locked me away to steal everything I had. The room erupted, shouts, whispers, phones coming out to record. Simone stood, her face white, then red, stammering something about me being unstable, but I cut her off. I held up the flash drive. It's all here, proof she can't deny. She said I had nothing left to offer. Watch me. I tossed the folder into the crowd, pages scattering, and walked off the stage as security moved in, not sure who to grab. Aurora was on her feet, staring at me, her eyes wide with shock and something else, recognition, maybe hope. Miles dropped his glass, the crash lost in the chaos. I pushed through the crowd, my chest tight, and made it to the exit before anyone could stop me. Outside, the night air hit me, cold and clean, and I leaned against the sedan, breathing hard. I'd done it, blown her world apart in front of everyone she cared about impressing. My phone buzzed, the prepaid one I'd kept as Ronan, and I saw a text from an unknown number. Dad? It's Aurora. My knees nearly gave out. I typed back, yes, I'm here, and waited, my heart in my throat, as the gala dissolved into madness behind me. Simone's empire was cracking, and I'd just taken the first swing. The kids knew I was alive, knew I'd fought back. Whatever came next, I wasn't alone anymore. The fallout from the gala hit like a storm I'd unleashed, and I was right in the middle of it, watching everything I'd built as Ronan Vale collide with the wreckage of Callan Mercer's life. I'd barely made it back to the trailer that night, my hands still shaking from the adrenaline. Aurora's text, Dad? It's Aurora, burning a hole in my pocket. I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, staring at the prepaid phone, waiting for more, replaying every second of Simone's face collapsing as I tore her lies apart on that stage. By morning, my speech was everywhere, clips on news sites, shaky phone videos going viral on X, headlines screaming husband exposes wife's fraud at gala. The internet ate it up, and I watched it spread from the trailer's flickering laptop, my chest tight with a mix of triumph and dread. I'd wanted to break her, and I had, but now the pieces were falling, and I had to keep moving to catch them. Aurora texted again at dawn. "Where are you? We need to talk." I typed back fast, giving her the address of a diner an hour from the trailer, a quiet place where no one would look for me. I drove there in the sedan, the suit from the gala still on, crumpled now, and waited in a corner booth, my eyes on the door. When she walked in tall, sharp-eyed, her dark hair pulled back, I almost didn't recognize her, like she'd grown up in the weeks I'd been gone. She slid into the seat across from me, her face a storm of anger and relief, and said, "You're alive. You're really here." I nodded, my throat tight, and before I could say anything, she threw her arms around me over the table, knocking over the salt shaker. "She said you were sick, Dad. She said you left us." I hugged her back, hard, feeling her shake, and told her the truth: Silvergrove, the pills, the escape, everything. Miles showed up an hour later, quieter, his hands shoved in his pockets, but he hugged me too, his voice breaking when he said, "I thought you didn't want us anymore." That nearly broke me, but I held it together, explaining how Simone had locked me away, how I'd fought to get back to them. They believed me. The packages I'd sent had planted the seeds, and the gala had ripped the rest open. The news kept rolling in while we sat there, coffee going cold. Silvergrove was under investigation. Davina had come forward, testifying about forced admissions and falsified records, her name in every article. I owed her more than I could ever repay. My attorney, Miranda Kerrigan, a tough woman I'd hired with Valehouse money, was already on it, filing charges against Simone: identity fraud, unlawful confinement, asset seizure. The forged power of attorney was voided by a judge that week, and our joint accounts, well, what was left of them, were frozen, cutting Simone off from the cash she'd funneled into Mercer Solutions. She tried to fight back, spinning her story on some morning talk show, her eyes red like she'd been crying, saying I was unstable and she'd only wanted to protect the family. But the evidence was too loud: those emails from the flash drive, the bank records, Davina's testimony. No one bought her act anymore. Aurora moved in with me that weekend, dragging a duffel bag into the trailer, her jaw set like she'd made up her mind. "I'm not staying with her," she said, and I didn't argue. I'd missed her too much. Miles took longer, wrestling with it. But 2 weeks later, he showed up with his skateboard and a backpack, saying, "She keeps lying, Dad. I can't do it." We made the trailer work, 3 of us in that cramped space, cooking on a hot plate, laughing over dumb stuff like we used to. It wasn't home yet, but it was ours. Simone's empire kept crumbling. Mercer Solutions lost clients fast. Nobody wants a fraud running their business, and the Mercer Foundation folded when donors pulled out. The gala video looped online, my voice echoing. She said I had nothing left to offer. Watch me. People started calling me, strangers who'd been through their own versions of what Simone did: gaslighting, control, erasure. I didn't know what to say at first, but Aurora pushed me to talk, to tell my story. Valehouse Creative boomed, clients loved the rebel designer angle, and I took every job, building something solid for us. The courts hit Simone hard, but not hard enough. No prison, just a deal that stripped her of custody and business ownership. She moved to Arizona, vanished from our lives, and I didn't care where she went as long as she was gone. Aurora and Miles stayed with me, and we started healing, piece by piece. Miranda got me full custody a month later, and I watched Simone's name fade from headlines, her power dissolving like smoke. Every brick of her world fell: her reputation, her money, her control, and I stood there, not just watching but building. The trailer wasn't much, but it was where I got my kids back, where I proved I wasn't the man she'd tried to bury. I'd torn her down, not with fists or screams, but with the truth, and now I was free to rise. The reckoning came quieter than I'd expected, not with handcuffs or a dramatic courtroom showdown, but in a small family court hearing that felt more like an ending than a battle. I'd spent months as Ronan Vale, rebuilding from the trailer, watching Simone's world collapse after the gala, and now it was time to face her one last time. Not for me, but for Aurora and Miles. The hearing was in a plain room with beige walls and a judge who looked tired, like he'd seen too many broken families. I sat there in a cheap suit I'd bought for the occasion, my hands folded on the table, Miranda Kerrigan next to me with her stack of files. Every piece of evidence we'd used to dismantle Simone's lies. Aurora and Miles were with me, sitting stiff in the back row, their faces set like they were ready for this to be over. Simone walked in late, her hair pulled back tight, her eyes hollow, no trace of the polished woman from the gala. She didn't look at me, just sat with her lawyer, a guy in a shiny suit who kept whispering to her like he could still fix this. The judge started with the basics: custody, assets, the fallout of her fraud. Miranda laid it out clean and sharp: the forged power of attorney, the money she'd siphoned, the Silver Grove emails proving she'd locked me away to take it all. Simone's lawyer tried to spin it, saying she'd acted in good faith to protect the kids from my instability, but the judge cut him off, his voice flat. The evidence speaks for itself, counsel. This isn't a debate. I watched her then, really looked at her, and saw the cracks, her hands trembling, her jaw tight, the way she stared at the table like it could swallow her whole. She didn't fight much, didn't have the energy or the leverage. The deal was already on the table. No prison time if she gave up custody and her stake in Mercer Solutions, plus a fine she'd never pay off with what little she had left. She took it, her voice barely audible, when she said, "Fine." The judge signed off, and that was it. Custody to me. Her name off everything we'd built together, her life in Arizona or wherever she'd run to now. She left without a word, her lawyer trailing her, and I didn't feel victory, just relief, like a weight I'd carried too long was finally gone. I turned to Aurora and Miles, and they nodded, small smiles breaking through, like they'd been holding their breath too. We walked out into the gray afternoon, the three of us, and I knew she was out of our lives for good. Back at the trailer, things shifted fast. Veilhouse Creative was taking off, clients pouring in after the gala story spread, people drawn to the man who'd fought back from nothing. I started getting calls from magazines, small ones at first, then bigger ones, wanting features on the designer who exposed his wife. I didn't love the attention, but Aurora pushed me. "You've got a voice now, Dad. Use it." So I did. I wrote a piece for a national outlet, simple and raw, about what Simone had done, how she'd labeled me exhausted and unstable to silence me, how I'd rebuilt from a trailer with nothing but a laptop and a name I'd made up. It hit a nerve. Emails flooded in from people, men, women, some barely holding it together, who'd been through the same, partners who'd turned them into ghosts, systems that didn't listen. I started speaking at events, little gigs at first, community centers, libraries, telling my story, talking about invisible abuse, psychological erasure, how you can come back from it. Aurora came with me once, stood up after I finished, and said, "You didn't just come back, Dad. You taught me how to fight." The crowd clapped, and I had to look away so they wouldn't see my eyes well up. Miles didn't talk as much, but he'd sit in the front row, sketching in his notebook, and later he'd show me drawings, me on stage, strong, not the guy who'd collapsed on the kitchen floor. The house grew too big for the trailer. I hired a couple freelancers, rented a tiny office in town with a real desk and a coffee maker that didn't sputter. Aurora helped me with the books when she wasn't at school, and Miles took over the website, tweaking it with tricks he'd learned online. We were a team again, not just surviving but building something. The story kept spreading: podcasts, a TV spot, people calling me a voice for the silenced. I didn't feel like that, not really. I was just a guy who'd refused to disappear, but it meant something to them, so I kept going. Simone's name faded, her move to Arizona a footnote no one cared about. I heard she'd sold the house, the one I'd painted and fixed up over years, but it didn't sting like I thought it would. That life was hers, not mine anymore. We stayed in the trailer a while longer, saving up, planning. Aurora was eyeing colleges, talking about law school, inspired by the legal mess we'd untangled. Miles wanted to design skate parks, his quiet way of dreaming big. I watched them grow, heal, and I knew I'd done more than survive. I'd given them something to hold on to. The reckoning wasn't loud, but it was final. Simone lost everything she'd taken: custody, trust, the kids' love, and I gained it back, not by tearing her down, but by standing up. Every speech, every job, every day with them was proof. I wasn't nothing. I was Callan Mercer, and I'd made sure she'd never forget it. A year after the courtroom settled everything, I stood on the porch of our new house, a small place near the ocean with salt-worn siding and a view that stretched out to where the water met the sky. It wasn't fancy: 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a chipped counter, a yard that needed work, but it was ours, bought with Veilhouse money, a clean break from the trailer and the past. I'd found it online one night, scrolling listings while Aurora and Miles slept, and when I showed them the photos, they'd grinned like kids again. pointing at the porch swing and the patch of dirt where we could plant something. We moved in on a windy Saturday, the three of us hauling boxes, laughing when Miles dropped a lamp and blamed it on the ghosts he swore came with the place. The ocean air hit me every morning now, sharp and alive, and I'd sit out there with my coffee, watching the waves, feeling like I'd finally landed somewhere solid. Aurora was in college an hour away, studying pre-law, coming home every weekend with books and stories about her professors. She'd pull into the driveway in the beat-up car I'd bought her, honking twice so I'd know it was her, and we'd sit on that swing, talking about her classes or the latest case she'd read. She'd grown into this fierce, steady woman, her eyes bright with the same fire I'd seen at the gala, and I'd listen, proud as hell, knowing she'd taken what happened and turned it into fuel. Miles was still with me full-time, 15 now, taller than me and obsessed with his skateboard. He'd claimed the backyard as his workshop, building ramps out of scrapwood, dragging me out there to help him hammer nails or hold a level. We put up a swing set too, not the fancy kind we'd had at the old house, just a simple one from a hardware store. But he'd sit on it sometimes, swinging slow, and I'd catch him smiling like he used to when he was little. The garden was his idea. He'd started planting herbs and vegetables, saying it was for the vibes, but I knew it was his way of rooting us here, making it home. Inside, the house was ours in a way the trailer never could be. I'd set up an office in the corner of the living room, a desk piled with Veilhouse projects, logos, websites, branding for clients who kept coming, drawn by the story that wouldn't fade. The walls were bare at first, but Aurora hung photos, us at the diner after the gala, Miles on his board, me speaking at an event. Then came the mural. I'd hired a local artist, a quiet guy with paint-stained hands, to do something for the office wall. He came back with a piece that stopped me cold, a man walking out of a storm, his spine made of steel wires that turned into tree roots, grounding him as the clouds broke behind him. It was me, not my face but my story, and under it, in small black ink, he'd written, "Nothing left to offer? Watch me." I didn't tell him to put that there. It was from the gala, from the speech that had changed everything, but it fit, like a quiet echo of the fight I'd won. I'd stare at it sometimes, late at night when the house was still, and feel the weight of what it meant. The house kept growing, freelancers turned into a small team, the office in town got a second room, and I was designing for names I'd only dreamed of years ago. The speaking gigs kept coming to conferences now, not just libraries, people wanting to hear about resilience, about coming back from the edge. I'd take Aurora and Miles when I could, let them see what we'd built, and they'd sit in the audience, clapping louder than anyone. The emails from strangers didn't stop, people who'd been silenced, erased, reaching out to say my story kept them going. I'd answer when I could, simple stuff like, "You're not alone," or "Keep fighting," because I knew what it was like to need that. Simone was gone, a shadow I didn't chase. I heard she'd sold everything in Arizona too, moved somewhere else, but I didn't care, she wasn't part of us anymore. The kids never asked about her, and I didn't push. They'd talk when they were ready, if ever. We built something new here, no ghosts, no lies, just us, the ocean, and a life I'd fought tooth and nail for. The days were simple now. I'd work, cook dinner, usually something easy like pasta or burgers, while Miles set the table and Aurora called to say she was on her way. We'd eat together when she got there, the windows open, the sound of waves mixing with our voices. After, we'd sit on the porch, Miles sketching, Aurora reading, me just watching them, feeling the quiet strength of it all. I'd survived because I refused to vanish. Silver Grove, Simone, the collapse, none of it could take me down. I'd remembered who I was, even when they tried to strip it away, and now I had this, a house, my kids, a name that was mine again. Callan Mercer wasn't a ghost or a failure. He was the man who'd walked out of that storm, roots deep, unbreakable. And no one, not Simone, not the past, could take that from me again.